I was in the middle of preparing to attend the funeral of my beloved mother-in-law who had just passed away. Then all of a sudden, my phone rings. "Don't you dare come to the funeral. Go back to your parents' house in the countryside right away." What? Confused but obedient, I immediately headed home to the rural Midwest where I was from. Later, I found out from my husband about the existence of his estranged, despicable sister, Jessica. "So Mom's dead, huh? How much of the inheritance do I get?" The audacity of her trying to profit from my mother-in-law's inheritance. Unforgivable. I decided then and there to protect my mother-in-law's honor and fight against this vile sister-in-law. In the end, after a fierce war of words, my sister-in-law ended up in a dark, cold cell. My name is Kristen, a typical housewife. I'm married to Charles, a company employee, and we lead a blissfully happy life together. I've heard that many women struggle with their relationships with their husband's family after marriage, especially between a daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law, where there are often rumors of covert and brutal conflicts. I, too, had such a gloomy perception. However, fortunately, I've been able to lead a worry-free marital life in that regard. Yes, I had a great relationship with my husband's mother, Charlotte. For instance, "Kristen, what do you think of this cardigan? I knitted it thinking it might suit you." "For me? Thank you. It's adorable, and your knitting is really impressive." "I'm glad you like it. The wind is getting chilly, so be careful not to catch a cold." "Absolutely. Hey, if it's all right with you, could you teach me how to knit sometime?" It was just like that. Charlotte's smile was always filled with warmth and kindness. I owed her so much. She had even helped us financially at times. I loved my gentle mother-in-law and considered her like a second mother. But then, "Kristen, Mom passed away in the hospital." I received the news of Charlotte's death just the other day. I was shocked by her passing, and for a while I could hardly eat anything. But I guess that's reality, and I have to accept it. Come to think of it, Charlotte had been diagnosed with terminal cancer a few years ago and had been undergoing chemotherapy treatment ever since. It must have been a really tough fight. Whenever I visited her, Charlotte always greeted me with a smile. Surely she was doing her best not to worry us. I couldn't stand around just crying for her. I decided to send her off with a smile. With that in mind, I was getting ready to attend my mother-in-law's funeral, which was to be held at my husband's family home. Then, all of a sudden, my cell phone, sitting on the table, started ringing. Curiously, I checked my phone and saw my husband's family's number displayed on the screen. My husband had gone ahead to prepare for the ceremony. Maybe he'd forgotten something. I casually picked up the phone and put it to my ear. However, "Kristen, don't come to the funeral. Go back to your parents' house in the countryside right away." My husband's frantic voice echoed from the phone. "Wait, what? You want me to go back to my parents' house? Why are you in such a panic?" "Sorry, we had a bit of a problem at the venue. I'll explain everything once we meet up." Naturally, I was confused by my husband's words. What on earth was he talking about when he said problem? And I'd never seen him so flustered before. "Alright, calm down. For now, I'll do as you said and head to my parents' house." "Take a cab! I'll be right there. Bye!" With that, he hung up. Truth be told, my mind was filled with question marks. But if Charles said so, there must have been a good reason. So I changed my plans to go from my husband's family home to my parents' house under significant pressure. "Kristen, what's going on? Today's Charlotte's funeral, isn't it?" "Well, come in first. We'll talk inside." When I explained the situation, they were just as puzzled as I was a moment ago. However, without my husband's arrival, there was no way to elaborate. We nervously waited for my husband to arrive. About an hour later, my husband burst into the house. "Kristen, are you okay?" "I'm fine, but what happened to your hand?" Looking, I saw that my husband's hand was wrapped in a bandage. My husband touched his injured hand, making a terribly difficult expression. Next, he started to explain what happened at his parents' house and the whole circumstances surrounding it. Apparently, my husband has a sister 3 years older than him named Jessica. But this Jessica was a very undutiful daughter, causing troubles for the family from a young age. It turns out she's had more run-ins with the police than one could count. His mother, Charlotte, never gave up on such a daughter and always kept apologizing to people around them. And she even took responsibility for the debt that Jessica created. "I'll definitely pay it back, okay? Please, Mom." She believed her daughter's words, but Jessica betrayed that promise and left home. Jessica was cut off from my husband's family, and it has been a no-contact situation until today. And then Jessica showed up at his parents' house on the day of her mother's funeral. After so much time, one might think she would have grown a bit. However, the words that came out of Jessica's mouth were, "So Mom's dead, right? How much of the inheritance can I get?" Of course, my husband was furious with her attitude. Was that the first thing to say after their mother's death? He went on to angrily tell his sister that she was disinherited a long time ago. And also, to Charlotte, her daughter was no longer Jessica, but Kristen. In other words, me. What? Kristen? Who's that woman? It's ridiculous if she can inherit and the real daughter can't. Upon hearing the truth, Jessica became enraged, her face turning red. Then, she snatched my husband's phone and stormed out of the house in her car, hurling hostile words towards us. Apparently, the injury to my husband's hand was from her biting him at that time. I remotely locked the phone right away, but it seemed she might have found out our house location and Kristen's face from the contact list and photos. Oh my, I can't believe my ears! I was speechless for a moment after hearing my husband's words. I was surprised to learn for the first time that Charlotte had a daughter, and it was even more shocking that she was such a terrible person. "I'm sorry for hiding about my sister. It's my family issue. But now..." My husband apologized with a pained expression. We were thinking of how to deal with the situation, trying to cheer up my distressed husband. "Well, we should probably stay away from our city home for a while, just in case," he said. "Is our rural home address safe?" Yes, I didn't store that information on my phone. So for precautionary reasons, we decided to stay at our rural home. And then, as the new day dawned, the sun rose and the chirping of the birds filled the air. "I'm off to work. If anything comes up, give me a ring on my spare phone." "Okay, have a good day." I watched my husband drive off to work, a smile on my face. But inside, I was a whirlwind of anxiety. What if my sister-in-law showed up? What if she attacked me? These worries tormented me constantly. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's raging face at my husband's family home. But to my surprise, life at our rural home was peaceful. Day after day passed without incident, and time flowed tranquilly. The anxieties and tension that had bothered me were gradually subsiding, now barely a flicker. If only this issue with my sister-in-law could simply disappear. I started to think optimistically. That's when the situation changed. "Excuse me, is the couple Charles and Kristen at home?" That day, a police officer from the local precinct came to our house. What's this about?" I hesitantly asked, filled with a dreadful premonition, and it turned out to be spot on. Apparently, our city home had been burglarized. The police had just received a call from the scene. I contacted my husband to tell him what happened, and we rushed back to our home together. And when we arrived, sure enough, the house had been ransacked. Every drawer was open, as if a storm had swept through. "Is there anything missing?" the officer asked. "Well, let's see." Urged on, we checked the inside of our house, under the supervision of a police officer. Our bank books and other valuables seemed safe, for now. However, a few $100s that should have been in our dresser were gone. By the way, according to a neighborhood investigation, a suspicious woman had been spotted around here several times over the past few days. This woman was reportedly shouting in front of our house, yelling things like, "Come out!" and "Pay me back!" Charles, could that be? I'm pretty sure. I'd bet 90% sure that it's Jessica. My husband nodded while looking at me. We explained the recent issue with my sister-in-law to the police. The matter of the disrupted funeral, the stolen smartphone, and my husband's injured hand? The police responded rather smoothly. It was probably because we had previously reported the smartphone incident to them. Afterward, we had to give a more detailed account at the police station, and didn't get back to our rural home until it started to get dark. The burglar was caught soon afterward. As expected, the culprit was Jessica, my sister-in-law. According to the police, she was audacious enough to stay in a hotel near the crime scene after the burglary. She was supposedly taken into custody while nonchalantly receiving a massage from room service. Of course, she paid for all of this with the money she stole from our house. Even though she admitted to the crime, she was denying the burglary. Although I didn't understand the details, it seemed that when the crime involved family, things weren't so straightforward. Anyway, we were called back to the police station again. Guided by the officer in charge, we were led into the room, and there sat a brunette woman, sulking in her chair. Suddenly, she blurted out indignantly, "Charles, how could you do something like this to your own family? It's unbelievable." Jessica showed no remorse at all. In fact, she didn't even seem to think she had done anything wrong. She probably acted like this during the police interrogation too. According to her, she didn't enter the house with the intent to burglarize it. She claimed she had come to discuss inheritance matters, but since we were always away, she had no choice but to break the window and enter. Even the money she stole was only necessary for her to stay in a nearby location, so she said. In other words, it was all our fault. What a short-sighted and selfish way of thinking. To think that such a dangerous person harbored resentment against me. If I had bumped into her while I was alone, who knows what could have happened. The thought alone made me shudder. Meanwhile, my husband Charles and my sister-in-law were engaged in a heated argument. "You've got some nerve showing up after all these years and pretending to be a part of the family. Give me back my phone, will ya?" Fine, I'll give it back. You locked it right away so I couldn't even use it properly. Just like you, huh? Besides, family is family, isn't it? Both Mom and I cut ties with you a long time ago. That means you have no business with her inheritance. Oh, about that. Leaving all her money to a stranger's daughter instead of her own. Was the old hag out of her mind or what? Please, stop saying such disgraceful things. Before I knew it, I found myself shouting. I couldn't stand her disrespecting Charlotte. But Jessica shot back, glaring at me and sounding quite annoyed. "You're that Kristen woman, right? The one who stole the inheritance that was supposed to be mine." "No, I didn't steal anything. I mean, what do you mean?" With that, Jessica started bearing down on me. I hate to admit it, but her intense stare had me frightened. I lost the words I was about to say. Jessica seemed to see right through me, snorted, and began to laugh, looking as if she had just won a victory. At that moment, the police officer sitting with us coughed lightly and stepped in. "Let's all calm down, folks. It seems there's a lot going on, so why don't you have a family discussion first?" He must have decided it was a family matter from our exchange. "We can discuss the matter of the charges and everything else later," he said, bringing the situation under control. Later on, we set up a formal discussion at our in-laws' home. In a living room covered with carpets, Charlotte's relatives gathered around a large table. In the midst of this tense atmosphere, it was Jessica who spoke first. "If you give me my share of the inheritance, I'll let all the past rudeness slide. You should be grateful to generous me." Jessica was still as arrogant as ever. Well, it was to be expected. There was no way someone who hadn't changed in over a decade would change in just a few days. Every time she opened her mouth, she kept insisting, "Give me the inheritance! Drop the charges!" Of course, we had no intention of meeting her demands. "We've said it over and over. You were disinherited, so you can't receive any of Mom's inheritance." "Well then, why don't you guys give me some money after you receive the inheritance?" "There's no way that absurd idea is going to fly," my husband said, visibly frustrated. I calmed my husband and then turned to her, doing my best, to remain level-headed. Jessica, did you read all of Charlotte's will? There was a section about you too. I'm only interested in the part about the inheritance. The rest is probably just her grievances against me. No, Charlotte was concerned about you. She was filled with regret. Well then, she should have given me the inheritance, even more so. With that, Jessica scoffed in annoyance. My blood was boiling, yet I felt overwhelmingly sad. She saw her own mother, Charlotte, as nothing more than a convenient tool. Charlotte didn't give you any money because she knew she couldn't change you with it, I said without waiting for her response. I can't let a despicable person like you have even a cent of Charlotte's money. You're telling me you've got some nerve, considering you're not even blood-related. I don't want to hear that from someone who dismissed their own blood ties. Facing my words, Jessica faltered for a moment. Then her eyes narrowed sharply, glaring at me. It's an ugly, terrifying look. But this time, I couldn't look away. There's nothing more to discuss. Please, leave now, I said, locking eyes with the intimidating Jessica. Suddenly, Jessica lunged across the table at me, either out of rage or fear. But she was immediately restrained by my husband and other family members present. 10 minutes later, she was forcefully escorted out by the police who arrived at the scene. All the while, she continued spouting off insults, but by the time she was put into the patrol car, she had completely lost her spirit, slumping her shoulders. Afterwards, I heard Jessica ended up in prison. Our report of the incident had been officially accepted. Apparently, Jessica had a large amount of debt from loan sharks. It seemed that her obsession with Charlotte's inheritance was due to this hidden circumstance. Regardless, she is expected to lead a miserable life, never to see the light of day again. She just doesn't understand a parent's love. She made her bed, now she has to lie in it. We were reflecting on the recent events in our home, which was finally neat and tidy again, after a long time. As my husband offered incense in front of my mother-in-law's portrait, he said, "I was surprised, Kristen, to see you argue so bravely." Well, that's because I read mother-in-law's will again. The truth is, I had read my mother-in-law's will again the day before talking with my sister-in-law. I hadn't really had the time to thoroughly go through it before. The will was filled with Charlotte's passionate feelings, almost like a letter. Every word she had written stirred me up. Charlotte had always been concerned about her child. Without leaving a single grudge, she worried about her well-being, and she bravely departed for heaven, hoping for our happiness as a couple. She would have wanted to do many things for her real daughter. As I held my cardigan tight, I started to tear up thinking about my mother-in-law. Seeing me like that, my husband tried to cheer me up. "Kristen, would you knit something for me too?" "Sure, I'll show you mother-in-law's knitting technique," I said, wiping the tears from the corner of my eyes with a smile. We'll make good use of her inheritance. From then on, I vowed in my heart to live a happy life for Charlotte's sake as well.